welcome to the very first episode of the Ego Drop podcast. We're doing it.
We're here. Your hair looks nice, actually.
Oh, thank you.
Really
Thank
nice.
you.
I like it.
Thank you very much.
I'm Nicole.
And I'm Steph.
And so, welcome everyone. And get ready to listen to two friends talk about life. What do you want to talk about?
Me? Oh, food. Always. What we're having for lunch as soon as we stop this recording.
Yeah, I'm really hungry actually as well because I didn't have any brekkie today. Yes, but but of course, we're not here to just talk about food. We need to tell people, tell our listeners what this podcast is about. So it's called the Ego Drop, and so probably we need to explain to anyone listening why the ego drop, why they should listen to us, and of course we need to let people know what to expect, that kind of thing. Also tell them why we're doing this.
Well, we want to collect, don't we, stories, thoughts, theories and ideas about ego and how it affects your life, and we'll share a few tales of how it's impacted our lives and the lives of those around us.
And indeed, of course, we'll be welcoming you as our listeners to share your stories with us. And in due course, we'll kind of, give you the ideas as to how to reach out to us. But we'd love to hear your stories as well, because it's about us as well as it's about yourselves. And of course, some say that ego is a part of your personality. It's a part that explains as I or self, because that's what ego is, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's also about your response to different things. So when you respond to events and actions, generally speaking, that will be your ego that's influencing your responses.
Oh, indeed, it is. It is the architect really of your personality. It's your identity, isn't it? It's how you deal with situations, whether negatively or positively.
Yeah, definitely. And there's loads and loads of theories out there, and of course we'll be sharing some. We hope you share some with us. One such theory is based in yoga philosophy, which is what I've studied, and it talks about ego being your barrier from freedom from suffering. So essentially, if you want to reach your higher self away from suffering, you need to try to let go of the ego. And certainly most of the theories talk about garnering a healthier ego.
Yes, and Freud had some interesting views on ego, to including the suggestion that ego is continuity to your behavior.
Yeah.
So of course.
So I think when a lot of people think of ego, they just think simply of someone being egotistical or really arrogant, don't they? But it's not just about that.
Yeah,
sort of
it's not
thing,
about the cockiness and that. It's about. It's more complex, one may say. You need ego to give you confidence, don't you, to get through certain circumstances that you might find yourself in. But sometimes as well, it helps you to stay safe. It helps you to feel that sense of, how to navigate a situation that you might find yourself in. It helps you to make decisions, and that includes good decisions as well as bad decisions.
Definitely.
In egos, there's good and bad.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, really, when you delve into it. So obviously, we really hope that you can share some of your stories and your thoughts on it with us, please. So do you want to tell them how they can do that?
Sure. So if you haven't already, we're going to ask you to search for the Ego Drop. Also you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and you can certainly email us direct at theegodrop@gmail.com. And we endeavor to ensure that we respond to all your messages, and we'll do shout outs on the program. So we'll certainly read out whether it's your questions, suggestions, opinions, stories that you wish for us to share. And of course, we'll keep your identity, confidential if you ask us not to disclose who you are. But certainly we seek to, engage with you on a regular basis so we can share all stories.
But when we say we're going to answer all of your comments and messages, we'll only answer the nice ones because we have fragile egos and we're happy to talk in a vacuum. So we're going to take a little break.
Yeah, definitely.
So welcome back to part 2 of our very first podcast. Every week we're going to be reflecting on our experiences of ego and how it's affected us both that particular week, as well as touching on different topics. So Nick, how has ego affected you this week, do you think?
I'm thinking of 2 scenarios, but I'm trying to pick out the one that is less,
Well, yeah, pick one this week, save the other ones for next time.
Say the more controversial. So I had a situation. No, I'm not going to talk about that.
Intriguing.
Let's talk about, so I had a work situation this week involving a case where a probation officer, in my view, wrote a line, wrote something in a report of a defendant that I represent. And I just thought it was very mean, what she did. And I got my high horse for a second. I had to remain professional in front of the defendant as I had a conference with him. He was in the cells. And I was reading this report that she wrote as if she's a prosecutor. And I was really annoyed, and I wanted to go and argue with the probation officer in the court office downstairs to basically have a go, because I thought it was rude. And it's not about myself, it was more, and I don't know, is that ego, is that empathy? I'm not sure which one.
I think it's the ego is what stops you reacting in a bad way. So, for instance, when you are driving along the road and a car cuts you up, it's your ego that stops you chasing down the driver and beating them up, because as well as being a negative thing, sometimes ego can sort of remind you of the positive way to respond to events. So actually your ego kicked in and prevented you from having that argument.
I wanted to just go down, and have a little, I say argument, maybe I've said, but it's, I wanted to find out why, what this nasty, what you've done here. And I wanted to confront her. But even if I couldn't speak to her directly, speak to one of her colleagues about her behavior. And I had to maintain a sense of, okay, Nicole, do you want to make enemies in this building? Or enemies amongst them? So instead what I did, I didn't confront, because I was feeling really upset. Not because it impacts me, what's been said, but I felt a sense of, here is someone from a foreign country, doesn't speak this language as a first. He's got himself in serious trouble, but there's no need for that line that she took in that report. And so instead what I did, I ventilated that in the court to the judge in a professional manner. And I, instead said to the judge, she's done this, she's had this opinion in the report, and I don't think she's entitled to have those kind of opinions. That view is one that is reserved to the prosecutor who's prosecuting the case, but also, Your Honor, who's deciding on what sentence to pass and so on. So I had to pull myself back and and put the emotion to the side and say that wouldn't be appropriate, maybe.
We should perhaps point out here that we know each other through criminal defence work. She's not just somebody that randomly goes to court and starts shouting at the or anything like that.
You imagine?
I forgot we haven't actually told anybody about that. So but no, I think that's a really positive example, isn't it, of where your egos jumped in there. So
So how about you? How has your ego impacted you this week?
Well, I think in a similarly positive way, actually, because I've begun a number of projects this week and they're all a bit sort of nerve-wracking. Obviously, this podcast being one, and a few other ones that I won't go into detail at the moment because they're still in their infancy, but a lot that's meant I've got to put myself out there a bit. And so I've had to give up that kind of fear of failure, or the fear of what other people might think, or the fear of, no one listening to this, for instance. I think, you only live once, so it's about sort of putting aside that worry and having the confidence to go forward. So sort of garnering that healthy ego again and giving it a try. So I think that's probably the best example for me this week.
Yeah. So your ego, it seems, then it's about confidence. Is that right?
Yeah, my experience this week is definitely a positive, confidence boosting sort of self-confidence, but hopefully not being overly confident. But yeah.
Oh wow.
I'm sure we'll explore that later on.
Definitely. Well, the thing is though, although we're at this place this week, I think the reality is we'll probably come back to some of these kind of with the experiences or topics. We'll find ourselves in a position where we might overlap a little bit, maybe, because you might find in 2 or 3 weeks or another episode we're talking about something and then it's linked back to this, isn't it?
Definitely.
Because it's not an open shut kind of topic.
No, definitely not.
Anyway, so shall we look at a topic for today?
Yeah, what's this week's topic?
What about criticism? What do you think about that?
Go on then. Go on then. You go first.
Oh God.
What's your views on criticism and its relationship with ego?
So how does criticism link to ego? Well, we can think of it's. I was gonna say it's easy, but it's not, is it? Because like now, you asked me the question, I'm having to think. And easily in the moment, you can think about it. Somebody says something about you that you don't like. The first thing that you do is you feel it's like a punch in the stomach, in the gut, isn't it? It's almost like, so you get that punch in the stomach and you're like, wait, who are you talking to? And it's almost like that immediate need to respond.
Protection.
And sometimes we don't even think before we respond, do we? We just go straight into defense mode. And now I'm in this battle with you. And we're not even listening to what's been said to work out, is it a constructive criticism or is it a negative criticism to kind of, so your ego is right in the midst of this storm. And in that moment as well, is the ego in a place of, hey, is she trying to say something good here? Is it supposed to help me? Most people, we get into this rage, don't we? Because you feel that immediately we think we're being attacked. And I'm wondering, why is that?
It's these natural defensive instincts, isn't it, kicking on in the survival instinct?
Yeah.
Someone's knocking you down, so you need to get on high alert and respond.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So in terms of criticism and ego, my view is, it's good if we're able to sometimes, but I know it's not always possible for everyone, but sometimes just to stop in that moment, if and process this information that's been given or sent my way. I'm receiving it. How am I receiving it? What is it meant to do? Is it meant to serve me? And it doesn't take a lot or a long time, I believe, to process that. I think it's a case of you hear it. Okay, let me stop. What's this meant to do? Is it meant to this? Is it meant, process very quickly as you can. And then you can choose the way you respond, because then in that moment, I feel like I'm being attacked. I feel she's talking down to me. I feel he's trying to this, and it's stopping and asking yourself in the moment, is it meant to serve? And then if it's meant to serve, then you're able, hopefully, in that moment. And if it isn't, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
If someone's criticizing you, what's the worst? So it's in that moment again, going into oneself and asking those questions. How do I feel? Is that what's intended? Yeah. Go inside yourself.
And from my point of view, it goes to having either a healthy ego or that sort of unhealthy ego, because obviously if you've got a healthy ego, you might be more inclined to do what you've just said, take a step back, absorb it. Is it positive criticism? Is it negative criticism? Can I do something with that? Or if your ego isn't particularly healthy, then, or if you're feeling particularly fragile, then you will go on the defensive and you won't necessarily respond in the best way. So from my point of view, if I've got a healthy ego, then I might do something like we're doing this week. You know, have that sort of self-worth, self-confidence, put yourself out there like we are today. Whereas if my ego is feeling a bit more fragile, which I'll admit sometimes it does, then you will have that low feeling of self-worth.
Yes.
So for instance, it's taken us 6 months to get to this point today because I just haven't felt like confident enough to want to put myself out there. And so
it's all about fear as well, isn't it?
Definitely, it's the fear of failing. It's, oh my god, what will people do when they watch this, or they think, oh, who does she think she is? You know, all those silly things that don't matter in life, you know. But again, it's all about that, isn't it, really? And
as Jeffers say, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it takes some reflection, and you know, you can't just remove the fear if you're feeling it, can't you? You have to kind of stop to in your tracks and say, okay, if someone criticizes, if I'm criticized, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
And if I'm criticized, they're entitled to have their opinion. Good, bad, or ugly, isn't it? Indifferent, you're entitled to that opinion, but of course it's how, again, I process that.
And it's like when we said earlier, if you let go of your ego, then you're not going to suffer.
Yeah.
So if that person is saying something, not to be constructive, but they're just being mean with their criticism, if you've let go of your ego, you can just let it float on by. But it is easier said than done, isn't it?
It takes work. It takes work. It takes a lot of work. And I think with work and time, it does eventually.
You can get there, can't you?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes, so it's important, I believe, to understand when our ego comes out in a negative way. And again, it goes back to that whole defensiveness and how we respond, I think. And it's and as such, is when we don't take criticism, you know, when we're criticized, when we don't take it well, and as you've said about the suffering, how it impacts you, how, you know, how long that suffering progresses or lasts. And it's down to how we deal with that, isn't it?
It is, definitely.
And so, yes, we might feel a little bit hurt. As we always say, my ego is bruised.
Yeah, your pride is hurt.
My pride is hurt. I'm so hurt. It's weird, isn't it? But when you think of your younger self, though, and you think of Steph now and Steph then, do you think you handle the hurt, pride, ego in any different way?
I think, generally speaking, I think I handle it better these days, because I think it's the beauty of getting old and giving 0 Fs, as it were, about what other people think. I think when you're younger, you care about what your peers think, about, you know, what possible mates are going to think, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But I think as you get older, one of the privileges is to just be who you want to be, you know, be your authentic self, and not give a damn what people think. So I think these days, if it's constructive, I'm happy to continue to improve and strive for being better at something. But if it's just tittle-tattle, and that sort of negative feedback, then I can, to an extent, let it wash over me. Although I do suffer a little bit with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, so I can respond to even perceived negative. So again, it just depends what mood you're in and how healthy your ego is feeling that particular day. And we'll talk in a moment about how you can perhaps improve that ego to a healthy status, because I think if you aren't doing things that are good for your mind as much as your ego, then again you can feel a bit more fragile about these things, can't you?
Yeah, see what you mean. But is it because, I just want to go back a tad. When I asked about the younger Steph and the older Steph now, is it because the younger Steph, or even younger self, not just Steph, because it applies to a lot of us, is it because when we're younger we're more focused on the outcome, we're more focused, the more emphasis is on the result, as opposed to you know, the action, like we're so outcome focused that and sometimes as well, do you think it's about we've got our own preconceived ideas in our mind as to how it it or the thing should turn out. So because we're so fixated on that, or we have a preconceived ideas in our minds, we tend to, if something happens differently, so whether it's a comment that's been made that we don't like or we view as criticism, or we might wrongly view that as a negative criticism, and so because of that we've gone down this.
I think there's an element of that. I mean, for me, in terms of outcomes, I never had, this is what I must achieve, this is what I'm going to do next. And I've been very fortunate with my career. It went pretty well, but it was never part of my plan. I must achieve this, and this is the outcome I must have. So in the normal sense, I think no.
Yeah.
But then when you delve a little bit deeper into ego and what it means, when you realise you're disappointed because something hasn't quite worked out, or you can't do the hobby that you'd hoped you'd be brilliant at. So it's sort of more minor things for me. And then you learn that actually that is still your attachment to outcomes.
Yeah.
Things haven't quite worked out and you kick yourself, and that's because you've put too much emphasis on the outcome. So I think there is an element of that.
Yeah.
But I think more for me personally, it was about caring a bit more about other people's views of me. So it's about really like self-criticism, more so than anything else, I guess.
Yeah.
So there's another Freudian theory called the superego, and it says that self-criticism can be really powerful, and it can be a result of an overactive, strong ego that overpowers your thinking and behaviour, so it makes you think that you are wrong. So I think at times, I can certainly relate to that. I don't know if can you?
Yeah,
of course. Have you got examples of being particularly overly critical of...
Of course, many a times. Too often. I mean, even in terms of, in my professional life, especially because I think I'm not going to say can be, I think I'm really hard on myself. And I question myself a lot in terms of when I'm operating my day-to-day life. I mean, I don't know, even when I was at uni as well, it's the same thing, You might read a book, or you may have an assignment, you finish in 2 seconds. I take a long time, over processing and double check, preparing. When I'm preparing for trials, I believe I take quite a long time, because for me, it's so important to not be wrong.
So you're a perfectionist.
Is that what it is?
I think so. I think that's a bit of ego.
I think it's because I'm barking. Sometimes I ask myself if I'm barking flipping mad.
No, I think you're a bit of a perfectionist.
But I worry a lot about getting things wrong in terms of work, because the criticism, as you know, it comes from whether it's a client, you make a major screw up. Are we allowed to use the F-bombs?
If you really want to.
But major screw-ups, a client, sometimes a seasoned criminal, they know when you do some boo-boos, or you have your opponent, look, they give you the eye like, what the hell is she on about? Or even a judge will, they'll stare you down.
You do have to be right in our line of work, don't you? You've got to do
so
that
I'm so worried about being criticized in a professional sense that you useless, or alternatively getting it wrong. Getting it wrong is more important. I don't mind the criticism if I'm in one sense, but getting it wrong, the ramifications of getting it wrong, you can be struck off. So yes is the answer to your question. What's the question again? I feel like I went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I guess we're talking about...
That's what we do as friends here. We just talk so much.
They're probably all turned off by now. But we were talking about self-criticism and leading on from sort of general criticism. But I guess to apply to both, we've got to think about ways that you can build that healthy ego and therefore deal with criticism a bit better. And some of the ideas that work for me are things like meditation, yoga, going for a walk, going for a run. For some people, it's going to the gym. Not me so much. Listening to music. Sometimes I journal, but a bit sporadically, I have to admit. But all those sorts of things for me are ways of getting getting out all that angst and sort of processing what's been said. So rather than having a sort of impulsive reaction to, oh my God, they said I was rubbish, or whatever it might be, then you sort of take time, step back, go for that run, write something down, and then just look back and think, yeah, okay, I can see why they've done that and why they've said that. Or not, maybe it is a completely negative experience, in which case you can go, it doesn't affect me,
whatever, nothing.
So lots and lots of different ways about how you might want to build a healthy ego.
Definitely. I mean, I there's some of them that you do that I used to do a lot and love to start doing again. But meditation is certainly one that I find very, very helpful. And I don't know about you, Steph, but I find that I can meditate even in a noisy place.
That's good. That's good.
I can honestly, I can sit in a room where there are people are talking or there's stuff going on, and I'm there but not present. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So that's why sometimes I can somebody can say to me, "Did you hear me?" And I was like, "Sorry," because I actually decided that I was going to.
That's really impressive. I'm not sure. I'm a yoga teacher, and I'm not sure I can quite.
I can really tune out. My saying is I just turn the volume down if I don't want to hear something. But the gym does help me a lot.
That's good.
I mean, okay, I don't look like it at the minute because I'm on the, I've given up for a year, but I'm back. So let's see. But yeah.
So
go on, sorry.
I was going to say, it does help if you can keep your ego out of any important conversations, really, so you can be open and honest and not be defensive or closed-minded. So you can be confident in your work or in your abilities or anything like that, but not closed-minded.
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
That way, hopefully that will help you to release that ego.
Yes. Maybe, what about, maybe our listeners have ideas on how to let go of suffering and any disappointment. Maybe you can, as our listeners, would like to share with us, what you do to...
we'd love to hear a bit more and a few other ideas. Help.
Definitely. Yeah. Because, we're here all for learning and growing together.
Definitely. Yeah. So, if you've enjoyed our discussion, or if you want to add to it, then as Nicole said earlier, you can find us on all the main social media platforms. So please do get in touch and make sure you listen to the next episode. Please do subscribe to our podcast, and we will be back in a fortnight.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.